Welcome to Gospel Truth with Andrew Wommack, celebrating 50 years of sharing God's unconditional love and grace.
Welcome to the Gospel Truth broadcast.
Welcome to a very special edition of the Gospel Truth.
Don't limit God. He wants you to have an abundant life.
God isn't angry at us anymore.
The war is over.
And I know that there's many of you who love God, but I tell you there's a better way to pray.
Everything that Jesus came to do, the power for it is released through the gospel, the good news, the nearly too good to be true news. Welcome to our Thursday's broadcast of the Gospel Truth. Today I'm continuing to teach verse by verse through the book of Proverbs, and we are now in Proverbs chapter 25. There's a total of 31 chapters in the book of Proverbs, so we're nearing the end of this, but we're also nearing the end of my 11th week of teaching on this. I've broken this up into little 2-week segments, and then we'll insert other teachings because it's been a marathon session. But I tell you, we're sharing things that, typically I probably wouldn't deal with some of these issues, but just going verse by verse through the book of Proverbs, it brings up issues that are pertinent to us today. Every single verse in here, there's not anything that we've studied in the book of Proverbs, and like I said, we're now into chapter 25. There's nothing that doesn't have a direct application to our life today. And the reason that our society is going the direction that it's going and getting increasingly more ungodly, things are getting out of control, is because we have forsaken the truths that are right here. These are God's opinion about just everyday things, how to deal with people, about all of the things that go on. And because we have forsaken God's instruction and we've leaned unto our own understanding, that's the reason that we're having the problems we're having in society today. And I know somebody thinks, well, that's a big statement, and you're saying it's all because we aren't studying and adhering to the Bible. Absolutely. Absolutely. These are truths that would change our lives individually and our society collectively if we would live by them. In Proverbs chapter 25, verse 1, it says, "These are the Proverbs of Solomon, which the men of Hezekiah, king of Judah, copied out." And so this happened 250 years after the days of Solomon. So Solomon was long gone. Hezekiah had these Proverbs copied out. And it says that Solomon wrote 3,000 Proverbs. That's in 1 Kings chapter 4, verse 32. And he also wrote 1,500 songs. And so we don't have all of those songs, and we don't have all of his Proverbs. There's only, I forget the exact number, there's 900 plus verses in the book of Proverbs, but I think there's around 500 Proverbs that are recorded right here. And so in the next few verses here in Proverbs chapter 25, the next few verses are all related to a king. And these are things that Solomon was saying from his position, from his perspective as a king. So in verse 2 it says, "It is the glory of God to conceal a thing, but the honor of kings is to search out a matter." So you know what this is saying? That kings and God are on different sides of this issue. Amen. God, it's a glory to conceal a thing. There's other scriptures that says that love covers the multitude of sin. Another place says a multitude of sin. God's kind of love will conceal a matter, and it doesn't rehearse all of these things. But kings, on the other hand, just love to search things out, reveal everything, to expose everything. I believe God's opinion is probably the correct one. In verse 3 it says, "The heaven for height and the earth for depth, and the heart of a king is unsearchable." And Solomon is the one who's saying this. And of course, I haven't been a king. I doubt if many people watching this have been a king. But we can take this as being inspired by God. That, it's hard to imagine what must go through the heart of a king when you have absolute power and authority. You could kill any person. You could promote any person. You can do anything you want to. You can go wage war. You can conquer other nations. That's an amazing thing. And I guarantee you, that's just a weighty deal. They need to be dependent upon God.
In verse 4 it says, take away the dross from the silver, and there shall come forth a vessel for the finer. Take away the wicked from before the king, and his throne shall be established in righteousness. You know, again, most of us don't have a king and, subject relationship. We have governments today that are some form of a representative government. But this same principle still applies to anybody in authority. It doesn't matter if it's talking about a president, a prime minister, or if you're just talking about the person who's the president of a club or the head of a church or your boss or anything where there's an authority system and somebody's in charge and other people are under them, that if you would remove the wicked from those systems, then the throne will be established, the business will be established, the church will prosper. You know, I remember a situation where there was a guy who worked for me, and he was one of my good friends. He wasn't wicked in the sense that he was evil, but he had some bad qualities. He gossiped. He talked about me behind my back. I remember it was reported to me that I said, we're going to do this, and he came up later and told the rest of the employees, he says, I don't care what Wommack says. You know, I'm the one that does this, and I'm going to do what I want to do. He wasn't a wicked person, but that was absolutely the wrong attitude. And anyway, because of a number of different things, we had to let this guy go. And when he left, it was just like this talked about. You know, there's another proverb that says, cast out the scorner, and the strife will cease. And when this guy left, I mean, it just was automatically peaceful and things were so much better. And I determined right then that once I see this negative attitude in any person on my staff, and if they threaten to quit or something like that, I'm going to let them. I'm not going to try and talk a person with a bad attitude into staying. And that's been decades ago, and I have followed this. Matter of fact, right after this person left, there was another employee who was such a good friend with me that they thought that if I had to choose between this new person that was coming in and them, that I would choose them and that they would get rid of this person. So because of that, they came to me and says, I'm going to quit. And they just started griping and complaining about a number of things that this manager that I was bringing in was causing. And because I had just made this decision, I said, well, I'm really sorry to see you go, but I'm not going to talk you out of it. And I accepted their resignation. And they told me later, they were just shocked. They didn't think I would accept it. But you know, these verses right here instruct me that once a person gets a bad attitude, you know, especially in my situation, there's 100 people that would love to have the job of any person on my staff. And I can guarantee you that why sit here and try and force a person with a bad attitude to stay when there's other people who would come in and just be thrilled to have that job. These are proverbs right here that you can apply to your church, to your business, to all kinds of things. You just cast out the person with the bad attitude. You remove that wicked person, and your business, your church will be established. I don't like confrontation. I hate doing that, but you know what? I've found out that sometimes firing a person is less of a pain than keeping them and seeing this situation just continue on. In verse 6 it says, put not forth thyself in the presence of the king, and stand not in the place of great men. For better it is that it be said unto thee, come up hither, than that thou shouldest be put lower in the presence of the prince whom thine eyes have seen. Did you know that this is exactly what Jesus did in Luke chapter 14, verses 7 through 11? He says, when you go to a feast, don't seek the highest place closest to the person who's the head of the feast, but rather take a lower seat, so that instead of being shamed when somebody says, hey, you need to sit down and let this person who's more important than you come, instead you need to take the lower seat and let them invite you to come up hither. This is exactly what Jesus said. You know, I don't know if Jesus got his inspiration from this from Proverbs 24, verses 6 and 7, but I believe he probably did, but if he didn't, he's the one that inspired it to be written in the first place. This was in the heart of God, and Jesus existed long before he came into that physical body. But this is exactly what Jesus said. This is a New Testament principle that was written right here in the Old Covenant. In Proverbs chapter 25, verse 8, it says, "Go not forth hastily to strive, lest thou know not what to do in the end thereof, when thy neighbor hath put thee to shame." And I believe that the next verse goes with this, "Debate thy cause with thy neighbor himself, and discover not a secret to another." In other words, this is saying you need to be careful. You don't need to be a quick-tempered person who just easily gets into arguments, debate, strife over things, because you may lose. You need to weigh things and say, is it worth getting into an argument? Is it worth the potential risk? You need to evaluate things. But we have a lot of people today that, boy, they just fly off the handle. They say whatever they want to, and then ultimately they get shamed by it. But instead of that course of action, verse 9 says you need to debate your cause with your neighbor yourself. Did you know that this is exactly what Jesus instructed us to do in Matthew 18? He says if somebody has wronged you, you go talk directly to them. Don't talk about them to anybody else. Don't say anything about a person that you haven't already said to that person. You need to go to that person personally and humble yourself and try and make this right. This is exactly what these verses are saying right here in Proverbs chapter 25. In verse 10 it says, "Lest he that heareth it put thee to shame, and thine infamy turn not away. A word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in pitchers of silver." Man, that's quite a word picture. Man, can you imagine a gold apple, how much that would be worth, and a picture made out of silver? Man, this is talking about it's valuable. Words spoken. A right spoken word is powerful. You know, I make my living talking, and I certainly don't do it as well as I should, but I do it better than I used to. And there are times that God has just given me a word for a person, spoken something to them. And it's not, always positive. Sometimes it's negative, but nonetheless, when you are inspired by God and when you can speak as the mouthpiece of God, as the oracle of God, it's like apples of gold and pitchers of silver. It is priceless. As an earring of gold and an ornament of fine gold, so is a wise reprover upon an obedient ear. You know what? Women go to great lengths to have earrings of gold and fine gold and jewelry and all of this. And there's some people that wouldn't dare think of leaving home without all of this jewelry. I know that my wife, every once in a while, we'll be driving somewhere and she'll say, "Oh, I forgot my earrings. I just feel naked without my earrings." And so she keeps a spare pair of earrings in her purse so that if she forgets to put something on, she'll always have something. And you know what? There's some people that they constantly are thinking about this. Well, we need to be as concerned about the words that are spoken to us and about things as we are about our physical appearance in these things. It says a wise reprover upon an obedient ear is much more valuable, much more attractive than all of this jewelry that we could use. Now notice it says it has to be upon an obedient ear. There is such a thing as casting your pearls before the swine, and the Lord told us not to do that. We need to have enough discernment to know whether or not the person that we're talking to, and if there is a reproof to be given, you need to have enough wisdom to know, is it proper to say it? Sometimes you're just wasting your breath. I noticed when I was a pastor that, man, it seemed like the people who just constantly had problems, they were the ones that were always there wanting my attention. And I learned after a while that I was neglecting some people who would have heard my counsel and who would have received it, but I was so busy dealing with these people who just wanted my attention, and I'd give them this counsel and they'd never follow it. After a while, I had to learn to shun the people who I knew weren't going to receive what I had to say and use my efforts put into people who would listen. That's what this is talking about. In verse 13, "As the cold of snow in the time of harvest, so is a faithful messenger to them that send him, for he refresheth the soul of his masters." You know, just imagine if you were really hot, how good a nice cool drink of water would be, or snow. Man, in the heat of harvest. You know, it says that when you do this, it's refreshing to the masters when you send a person who is a faithful messenger. And on the opposite side of this, if you send an unfaithful messenger, you're going to wind up hurting from it. So this is just a great piece of instruction for us about how we need to trust people who are faithful to have them represent us. In verse 14 it says, "Whoso boasteth himself of a false gift is like clouds and wind without rain." Again, if you look at this from an agricultural standpoint, this was written to people who were really into agriculture, much more so than our modern people are today. But you know, if you were wanting rain, if you were praying for rain, and I mean crops were absolutely dependent upon this, when you see a cloud come over, it gets your hopes up, but then if it doesn't have any rain in it, you know, Proverbs 13:12, hope deferred makes the heart sick. In some ways, it would have been better to have had a clear sky and not even get your hopes up if you aren't going to get any benefit out of these clouds. And so this is saying that likewise, people who make a boast of a false gift, something they profess something that they don't have, it actually winds up being it's worse than if you hadn't have promoted yourself and have claimed to have all of these things. It gets people's hopes up. They're expecting something, and then when they get around you, you can't deliver. In verse 15 it says, "By long forbearing is a prince persuaded, and a soft tongue breaketh the bone." And notice that this is King Solomon who's saying this, and he's saying that when you just keep after something, and again, there has to be a right and a wrong way. It can't be nagging. It can't just be all criticism. But if you just give people time, and if you do something over a prolonged period of time, it says a prince will be persuaded, and a soft tongue breaketh the bone. Words are more powerful than anything physical. You know, when I was a kid, we used to have this little saying that said, "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me." That is absolutely untrue. Proverbs 18:21 says, "Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and they that love it will eat the fruit thereof." Words are powerful, and if it's a soft word, that's talking about a complimentary word. You can penetrate to the very heart of a person, down into their bones. I mean, words are powerful, powerful things for either good or bad. This is talking about it in a good sense. In verse 16 it says, "Hast thou found honey? Eat so much as is sufficient for thee, lest thou be filled therewith and vomited." In other words, too much of a good thing is bad. You can take anything that's good and actually make it bad if you eat too much of it. And an example here is eating so much honey that you wind up getting sick and vomiting it up. And so in the New Testament it says, "Let all things be done in moderation. Let your moderation be known unto all men." You know, there are some people who will not go to an extreme, say for instance in alcohol or in, you know, certain things, but then they will go to extreme in good things. Again, everything has to be done in moderation. Honey taken in a small amount is good for you. In verse 17, "Withdraw thy foot from thy neighbor's house, lest he be wearied of thee, and so hate thee." Boy, this is a great truth right here. You know, my mother drilled this into me. We were always taught that, you know what, even if a person is your friend, you can overextend your welcome. You need to be a little reserved. You need to give people space. And that's exactly what this is saying. And there's some people that don't understand this. I'm telling you, the Word of God will teach you how to maintain relationships. You need, even close friends, you don't need to impose upon them. You know, I've had some people who I had admired my entire life, and in just the last year or so, these people have come around, they have given me their personal numbers and things like this. And you know what? This proverb right here gives direction to me. I do not impose on these people. I will contact them. You know, to have friends, a man must show himself friendly, and so I do believe that there needs to be some communication, but boy, you can overdo it. You can get to where a person is sorry that they ever gave you their number because you're imposing on them. See, the scripture right here tells you how to administer relationships, gives you wisdom. There's a balance. There's some of you that if you aren't careful, you will become a drain on a person just because you demand so much of their time and effort. you need to use restraint in your relationships. In verse 18 it says, a man that beareth false witness against his neighbor is a maul and a sword and a sharp arrow. You know what a maul and a sword and a sharp arrow all have in common? That they are weapons that can kill a person. And when you are giving false witness against your neighbor, it can kill a person. Maybe not physically, I guess it could kill them physically, but it certainly can kill the relationship. It can do damage to them. It's just terrible. You need to quit. You should never give a false witness, but especially not against your neighbor. It says in verse 19, confidence in an unfaithful man in time of trouble is like a broken tooth and a foot out of joint. Man, can you imagine what it would be? I mean, most of us have had a broken tooth or some kind of a toothache, or you've hurt your foot. You are just absolutely, totally ineffective as a soldier when you have a broken tooth or a foot out of joint. It's painful, and it's something that we avoid with all that we can. And if you put confidence in an unfaithful man, you are just exposing yourself to that kind of pain and suffering, and it's going to incapacitate you. We need to find faithful men and women. You know, the verses that the Lord used for me to start Charis Bible College are 2 Timothy chapter 2, verses 2 through 3, and it says, the things that you've heard of me among many witnesses, the same commit thou to faithful men and women who shall be able to teach others also. And then in verse 3 it starts giving you some of the characteristics of faithfulness. And it's saying that we need to entrust faithful men and women. You know, there's a lot of people who are zealous, but are they faithful? There are a lot of nice people that I like, but are they faithful? You know, we have people come to our school, and I like them. I'm not against any of them, but there's not every person that comes to our school is a faithful man or woman. And when I start looking at people that I want to hire and that go out and represent me to start another school or to do whatever, you know what, we pay attention to whether they're faithful or not. And this is saying that you don't put confidence in an unfaithful man, or it's like having a broken tooth or a foot out of joint. You just don't do that. In verse 20, as he that taketh away a garment in cold weather, and as vinegar upon nitre, so is he that singeth songs to a heavy heart. Man, if you take away somebody's coat in cold weather, it's going to be unpleasant at the very least, and it could cause them to freeze to death. And like when you put an acid upon baking soda, is what this is talking about, and you see that bubble up, there's this reaction. Boy, when you sing songs to somebody who's grieving, it's just not the right thing to do. Now there's a balance here, because we are supposed to grieve with those who grieve. We're supposed to show compassion, but sometimes we need to come in and encourage a person. Instead of getting down and wallowing in their misery with them, we need to show them that, hey, you need to be strong in this situation. So there's a balance here, but there's a practical piece of wisdom here that would help us in our relationships.
50 years ago, God inspired Andrew Wommack with the simple vision of changing the world one life at a time. No one anticipated that with mass media, such a small beginning would eventually explode to 3.2 billion potential viewers worldwide. This phenomenal growth has been fueled by you, the friends and partners of Andrew Wommack Ministries. You have funded the building program to accommodate Andrew's vision for media and for Bible education through Charis Bible College. And now, at the Sanctuary property in Colorado, another milestone is being reached in the quest to send God's unconditional love and grace to the world. Construction is nearly complete on the new Phase 2 auditorium. This fall, we invite you to come be a part of the dedication of this facility. Festivities begin Friday, November 2nd with the world premiere of a powerful new musical, David, the King of Jerusalem, the first dramatic performance on the new stage. Then on Saturday, November 3rd, the dedication of the Phase 2 auditorium. Special guests include Kenneth Copeland and Jesse Duplantis, who will join Andrew and Jamie for this milestone accomplishment. Seating for these events will be limited, so you need to visit our website today to register and to buy your tickets for the world premiere of David, the musical. Go to awmi.net/dedication and fill out the form. Make plans now for a weekend of celebration, dedicating the new auditorium at the Sanctuary in Woodland Park, Colorado. We'll see you there.
We trust you're growing in wisdom as you study along with Andrew through the book of Proverbs. You can get the entire series that covers all 31 chapters of Proverbs in a CD or DVD album for a gift of any amount when you contact us. If you'd like to enhance your study, make sure to get a copy of Andrew's brand new hardcover book on Proverbs that includes all of his personal study notes and commentary on hundreds of verses. This book is available for a gift of any amount. The 14th audio teaching in today's series is available for a gift of any amount when you write or call. We encourage everyone to give, but if you're simply unable to afford it, Andrew and his partners will provide this 14th CD free of charge. You can become a Grace Partner or order resources through our website at awmi.net. Or call our helpline Monday through Friday from 4:30 a.m. to 9:30 p.m. Mountain Time. Our helpline number is 719-635-1111. To write us, use the address on your screen. We appreciate your generosity and hope to hear from you today.
All right, this is our construction update. We're now in the auditorium and I'm standing on the stage, and you can't really tell it because they got a lot of it covered, but we do have carpet on the stage now, and they have put a lot of the woodwork on the stage. The most notable thing is that we've got 2,000 of our 3,200 seats already installed. They still have plastic over it, but this gives you a little bit of idea about how it'll look. So we're going to walk down to the end of this hallway and show you where our waterfall is. We're now down in front of our waterfall here. You notice that the logo is up since the last time that we did a construction update. And this is where the traffic will flow between the two buildings. Over here, you couldn't see this very well last time because they were putting up the moss rock and they had scaffolding all up here. But these 4 openings that you see in the upper level of the barn will come in right there. And behind the waterfall, from way over there where you can see those that glass with the X marked on it in the blue tape, from there all the way around behind the waterfall and all the way over here, this is all our bookstore. But let me just tell you while we're here that we still have $1.3 million to pay on this building, and that's not including the retainages. The retainages are $1.6 million, and they will be paid out all the way through October, so we have a little bit of time to come up with that. I want to take you out and show you some of the construction on the garage that's being done. Okay, we're now out on the northwest corner of our auditorium. Right behind me, they are beginning to pour our parking garage. So awesome things are happening. Thank you for being a part of it, and God bless you. We'll give you another construction update in about a month.